So tonight, B'ezrat Hashem, we'll talk about Teumim, Mazal Teumim or Gemini. I don't think there are that many Geminis in this group. Otherwise, you would be already talking and asking questions. Just joking. Anyway, a quick overview, just a quick overview. I don't know how many of you could read it. Just a quick overview of some of the characteristics, the positive and the negative. Geminis are known to be very adaptable and versatile. And that's very good in situations that require adaptation. You move to a different city, you move to another job. They're communicative. It's very good if you want to be a newscaster, you want to sell something. They're very communicative and witty. They have a sense of humor, intellectual, eloquent, youthful, lively. This is just an idea of what you're dealing with here. On the dark side or the negative, they can be very nervous and tense, superficial, inconsistent, cunning, and inquisitive. They like talking, reading, variety in life, multiple projects going at once, novelty and unusual. They dislike feeling tied down, being in a rut, mental inaction, and being alone. Gemini is very different than Taurus and gets along better with Aries. So far we've had a fire element, Aries, we have had an earth element, Taurus, and now this is our first air element, Gemini. Next week, B'ezrat Hashem, we will have our first water element, Cancer. And early on, in our very first lecture, in the introduction to astrology, we talked about Kochot HaNefesh, the various energies that we all have based on the element, the dominant element. And I pointed out that earth gets along with water better than it does with air or fire. Fire gets along better with air than it does with earth or water. That's just a fact, except for that we may have more than one element. And that is what explains why some people can get along with more people than with others. Some get along with less people. Some people are more adaptable. It's easier for them depending on the elements that they have. But there's always a dominant element, and that's the most important element. The dominant element of Gemini is air. That's his element. But this Gemini, if he's born on a certain hour, that hour may give him a lot of more of an earthy element. It may make that communicative Gemini a little bit more quiet. That humorous, supposed to be humorous Gemini, more serious perhaps. You see what I mean? It may take the Gemini and somehow reduce the intensity of some, not all, but some of the qualities. And as I've done with the other signs, what we'll do now is go over in depth various parts of Gemini, his likes and dislikes, his personality, how people see him, his strengths and weaknesses, and then we'll go over and separate the man from the woman. Then talk a little bit about advice for Gemini children and how to deal with a Gemini boss or what to be aware of a Gemini boss. Okay, so let's begin now. How do you recognize a Gemini? Well, what I did here is give you an example of where you may find him. You may find him in a bookstore, browsing through the books. And the reason I wrote browsing is because they like to skim through the books. Many of them will read the last page first. They will not read the book from cover to cover. And you will understand, when I say these things, you will understand later on when we talk about the various characteristics in Gemini, you will understand why he can't do that. Why it's not in his nature to read an entire book. They pick up information very quickly. They're good in reading very quickly. Very inquisitive, curious, knowledgeable, and have wide interests. Very few signs can be knowledgeable in many areas. You'll be surprised. You may meet a Gemini who will talk to you about geology, archaeology, history, languages, Torah. All of these wide interests, however, I assure you that they will all be superficial. None of them will be too much in depth. Unless someone specializes in one area, then of course he's knowledgeable in that area. But to know a lot of everything, that's not them. But they will know a little bit of everything, which is also good. They're air, so that makes them more intellectual, more interested in the intellect, and that which is mental, reading and writing, etc. Now, you will see how each one follows the other. As a result of their specific interests and their particular nature of being very curious and inquisitive, you will notice also that they have a nervous energy around them. Just every part of their body is always moving. It's a certain nervous energy, and that is how you can identify them. That is how you know that he's a Gemini or she's a Gemini. Many of them, not all, but many of them actually talk fast, think fast, and are impatient with those who are more conservative or with those who cannot make up their mind. You could follow it if you want on the PowerPoint, if it's easier for you, or you can listen however you prefer. They don't have that much patience. So people who have a hard time making up their mind, people who are slow or conservative. Now, what does conservative mean? A person who's conservative likes old-fashioned, likes tradition. And these individuals like change. So they are not necessarily going to get along easily. They are alert with their eyes, they notice things, and they tend to move around a lot. Now, because of all this nervousness, every sign, by the way, has different weaknesses in their physical body. Geminis, because they overexert themselves sometimes, they have what's called nervous exhaustion. And that's always going to be a threat to them. They have to get more sleep. They have to get a lot of rest. Their mind, their bodies are working full time. Now, Aries has a lot more drive than Gemini. Much more forceful. These individuals are not going to be so forceful or aggressive, but they're going to be doing, as you're going to see, a lot of things at the same time. And no matter how strong they are and how much they want to do it, you get exhausted. And that's one of the problems that Geminis have almost more than any other sign, is mental exhaustion from their nervous energy and from their activities. When you meet them for the first time, they show sympathetic friendliness. They're extroverts. They're social. They're open. And therefore you will find them to be very friendly, very sympathetic. They like people and are good conversationalists. They're good in talking. They have a sense of humor and are loaded with witty remarks. Every other sentence is something cute or funny. They can be tactful and diplomatic, but they can also be direct and blunt. Now, usually, if a sign is tactful, they're not direct and blunt. If you are direct and blunt, like Aries, you're not tactful at all. And I don't know of any Aries who's tactful. Because I didn't say that was bad, because sometimes you want to be direct and to the point. They can be both. What's funny about Gemini, Gemini are called the twins. Everything is double about them. They have many, many personalities. So they can have various abilities that sometimes appear to be contradictory. So they can sometimes be very diplomatic. They make good diplomats, you will see why later. But they can also be direct. And when they are direct, they can be very sharp and satirical. Does everybody understand what satirical means? Satire? They can joke in a very cynical way. They make good politicians, and many of the politicians are Geminis. Why? Now you will find out why. Because of their versatility and facility in speech and in writing. John F. Kennedy wrote his own speeches. He was a Gemini. He wasn't pure Gemini in every sense, but in many ways he was a Gemini. They also make good salesmen. Remember about Taurus? Taurus doesn't make a good salesman because he's too honest. Well, here you have exact opposite trait. Gemini makes an excellent salesman. He can sweet talk you. In two ways he will convince you. First of all, he has a persuasive smile. They're smiling. They're very persuasive. And they will talk you into buying something you can't use. Remember Taurus? Taurus won't sell it to you if he thinks it's not for you. He'll actually tell you to go to the competition if they have the better product that you need. Not Gemini. The bad ones can become dishonest, con artists, and counterfeiters. You've heard of people who counterfeit money? Con artists, a lot of them have Gemini in them. I didn't say that they're Geminis, but they have to have some Gemini in them because they have an imagination and they know how to talk. Taurus is not like that. I'll be extremely in shock if I find out that there's a Taurus who's a con artist. Just like I would be in shock if he's an addicted gambler. There are just certain signs that are totally not in those areas. But there are exceptions. But that's not the rule. Whereas Gemini, because of their skills, and they have some very good skills and talents, and one of them is speech. If it's misused, it can be used in a very, very negative way. To mislead people, to cheat, to lie. Right? And to be a con artist. A con artist is one who fools you. He tells you, I have a watch here. You want to buy it? It's a Rolex. It's really cost $10,000 in the store. And the reality is it's made in Taiwan, and it costs $5. You can pick it up in Kmart. It's called a con artist. In other words, he embellishes the whole thing and tries to sell you something which is not worth even, what he says. Continuing with their ability to be good speakers, they are also superb promoters. You want somebody to promote your product? Hire a Gemini. Now here's the problem. If he's promoting himself as a used car salesman, what will happen is he may tell you something like this. I wrote here an example. He may tell you that the car only had one previous owner. And who was that previous owner? An old lady that only drove their car on Sundays. I recommend that you check this one out, because it's usually not true. But they have this reputation, the used car salesmen. They're either Aries, Geminis, sometimes Sagittarius too. They just have that ability to convince. It's not true, but some of the times it's true. So for them, it's true. It's not a complete lie. It's a white lie, So she didn't drive the car that much. So they beautify it to make the sale. It's not completely honest, but they have a way with words. So you want to check this one out. Don't take his word for it. Now, the problem is, many times they put varnish on the story. In other words, they elaborate and beautify it and embellish it. And what are they thinking? You say to yourself, isn't this a lie? They'll tell you, no, it's just my imagination. In other words, trying to imagine how this is an old lady, she barely uses her car. So they don't really think of it as a lie. And that's the problem many of them have. They don't think that what they're doing is dishonest when it's really dishonest. Some of them have a mischievous delight in disconcerting slower minds. Because they're so quick, they actually enjoy sometimes taking advantage of those who are slower. Now, it all depends if one is good or not good, depending on one's education. But they have that ability, they have that tendency in them. It depends how it's directed. What kind of an example they saw in their home. Was their father like that? How did he treat people? A lot of it depends on one's education too. But no matter how good one's education is, even if one who grows up in a home of a rabbi, the child will still have his own mazal. And if he's not careful with how he exercises his free will, he can deteriorate. So a good education is very helpful, but it's not a guarantee. The next one is very interesting. They can do many things at the same time, much better than anybody else in the whole zodiac. I wrote here an example that I saw in one of the books that I read about astrology. In an hour's time, a Gemini woman, as an example, can find someone a babysitter, make out a grocery list, write 32 checks, make a phone call, fold the laundry, find her husband's tie, write down driving directions to her husband where he can pick up something for her son, and go through some bills, all within 1 hour. Now you try that. I don't think we would even think of doing that. We won't even try it. A lot of us have another day to do it. Tomorrow, mañana. Push it off. But they are capable of doing that. And they don't mind doing it. They can do a lot of things at the same time. And now you can understand why they can get tired. They can do more things at one time with less effort than most of others can do one. They just do it. There are many Gemini women that will iron, feed a baby, and talk on the phone all at the same time. You won't find a Taurus doing that. One thing at a time. Not a Capricorn. A Virgo sometimes. But not every sign, not everyone is capable or willing to do that much at the same time. What for? What's the rush? They can also talk themselves in and out of situations with the greatest ease. Come in, come out, and you know why that is. Because they're adaptable, easygoing. They're not rigid. Remember the rigid Taurus, the stubborn Taurus, not changeable, likes things the way they are, doesn't want to move, doesn't want to change. Well, here you have the benefit of versatility, the ability to adapt to the situation. That can be a big help. Sometimes it's no good because you want to be firm. One who's always changeable is not consistent. And sometimes you need consistency. So you see there's drawbacks, there's pros and cons to everything, to every midah. They tend to change their mind a lot. This goes along with changeability. You can't have the cake and eat it, right? If you are changeable, if you're adaptable, then your mind changes. They cannot be consistent. And that cannot be, sometimes that's not so good. If they don't always hold on to the same position for a long time, you know why. Because they change their mind. If they made up to meet with you, they can easily change their mind. But you said you're meeting up with me at 9 o'clock. I changed my mind. I have something else to do. When did you decide that? Oh, just a couple minutes ago. They changed their mind. You won't have that with a Taurus and not with a Capricorn.
It's unaccountable.
Well, not necessarily unaccountable. He'll just tell you, he'll tell you, meet me tomorrow, and he'll convince you to meet him tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay, he'll convince you to meet him tomorrow, and you'll go along with it, unless you've had it with him. But the first time, the second time, what did we say before? He's persuasive. He'll smile. He'll sweet talk you into it, and he'll say, I just had something else to do. I remembered I had something else to do. But when you see something recurring many times, you lose faith, you lose trust. You don't want to be his friend, maybe. That's, of course, up to you. But if you know that this is the way he is, maybe you should just live with it. That's sometimes easier than being upset at him, because he can easily change his mind. Cannot always back up everything he says and does not always keep his word. Does not like to commit in writing since he may change his mind tomorrow. Again, similar reasons. They're not that strong in consistency, in being able to guarantee something 100%. So usually they would rather not promise in writing. Why did I say in writing? Because they're very good with talk is cheap. So with talk, they'll say a lot of things, but they won't commit to writing. So they can be responsible. That is why they won't commit to writing. They know themselves. This Mazal, as opposed to Taurus, resents routine and monotony. They can't work routine. 8 to 5, regular job. They like to make their own hours. That's the way they are. If you give them an 8 to 5, they just won't be very happy. They like to make their own hours. Monotony, they're always looking for excitement and adventure. Not as much adventure as Sagittarius, perhaps, but they don't like things quiet and monotonous. They can be very restless, unpredictable, and not always very punctual. They are not from the most punctual signs. They said 9 o'clock. Especially if they're Persian, it means 11 o'clock. Right? Right? It depends, of course. If you're Iraqi, Persian, Mexican, all of these things, of course, have something to do with one's behavior and personality too, a little bit. But they're usually not on time. Geminis lack persistence and patience, and they may throw away the old for the untried new. Later on, he regrets it. Since they're always thinking about something new, let's try this one out. The older one was better. Why did you throw it out? Because of their tendency to want to change, and they act quickly, without thinking, without deliberating about it. Remember the Taurus? He deliberates, he thinks, he's slow, he's cautious. Not the Gemini, not as much. It doesn't mean he'll be completely reckless. Aries can be reckless. Why is Aries more reckless than Gemini? Because Aries has that drive. He pushes so hard and so fast that he doesn't stop to think. A Gemini is not as fast as the Aries. He just changes. Changes does not always mean that he's going to make a mistake. Many times he does. But the Aries drives very, very hard, so convinced that he's right, and eventually he falls down on his head, not just once, but many, many times. He picks himself up, and again he goes, and he falls again, and he never learns his lesson. Geminis will not fall too many times, but they will regret many things because they didn't think things through. Some of their weaknesses that are very noticeable are that they're very critical. Geminis and Virgos are the biggest critics of all. But we will talk about Virgo a little bit later. It's a different kind of criticism. Virgo can also be very demanding, and the criticism is usually, many times, good criticism. The criticism of the Gemini is never too positive. If it's a wife, she may criticize everything in her husband, from the socks he's wearing to his haircut. Not everyone pays that much attention to all these little details. But since they are in a critical mood, if they are in a critical mood, that is, they may just take the husband apart. But you know what? He may be used to it, depending what sign he is. If he's a Leo, he wants to know what the haircut looks like. The Leos want to show that they look always good. You mean my haircut, he didn't do a good job? I'm going to give it to him, to that barber. So the Leo will appreciate the criticism of the Gemini. You see what I mean? Some signs will go along with it. Good. It's good you told me. You mean it's the wrong tie, it doesn't match? Go get me that other tie. It's funny, but some people really just get along perfectly. Me'ashamayim, Hashem puts them together. They can become moody. They're not the moody type like the Pisces or Cancer or Scorpio. The mood is because of they're changing. They're changing, so they can become moody, cynical, and they can argue mentally with just about anything. Very argumentative. One of the things a lot of people find with Virgos when they're dating, with Geminis when they're dating them, or when they're getting to know them for the first time, they can't figure them out. Do they like me or do they hate me? Only with Gemini it's a mystery. And there's various explanations for it. One of them is that they usually, for some reason that nobody can understand, they disguise their true intentions. Deep down they're really cool. They don't display that affection and warmth sincerely like some of the other signs. Deep down they're more cool, but they're friendly. They smile. And they can be very social, but you can't sometimes figure out why they're doing it. It makes it confusing to figure out if they hate you or like you. And later on you find out that they discard their old friends because they found new friends that match their interests. So they are not the ones to hold on to friendships for a long time. But they will be friends with many people, but not a deep friendship unless there is a certain common interest between the two of them.
Would you say they use people?
Not necessarily. The fire signs use people. Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. Air people don't use people. No, they're pretty much independent. They do their thing. They don't necessarily use people. They can lie, they can cheat, they can mislead. But that's not called using people. That's abusing, yeah. That's worse than using, yeah. As parents, they give in to their kids. They're not overprotective like the Taurus. Remember the Taurus? The Taurus can be overprotective, possessive, limiting. They usually give in. They're adaptable. They're changeable. They're easygoing. They can more easily just give in. They'll worry more about the scholastic grades of their child than if the kid hangs up his clothes or not. They're not so much into they can be clean, they're not necessarily sloppy, but they're not so much makpid. They're not so strict about the order and the cleanliness of everything, as you will see soon, as much as other signs are. They're not so what's the word for it? Not conscientious, but so crazy, obsessed. That's the word I was looking for. They're not so obsessed about cleanliness as Virgo would be, for example. So therefore, certain things with their kids as parents, they will overlook, give in, be easygoing about it, not mind. Okay, now we'll talk a little bit about the differences between the men and the women. Now, a lot of what I've said applies to both men and women. Obviously, men and women are different, and some of what I said does not apply. Here, what I'm trying to do is separate the two, especially for those who are single, and you want to get to know who is this Gemini that I'm dating, or who is this Gemini that I'm going to be working for, whether it's a man or a woman. So I decided to give you a little bit of a description of the various characteristics in each one of them. Let's begin with the Gemini Man. Geminis are known to be good-mannered. Doesn't mean that other signs are not good-mannered. Virgos and Libras can be also very good-mannered. And just about any sign could be good-mannered. But they make an effort to be good-mannered. They're actually one of the favorite guests of a hostess, because they're charming, polite, talkative. They're not quiet, right? Imagine somebody being invited to somebody's home and staying quiet during the whole meal. Not everybody would enjoy him so much. They will not have a problem with the Gemini. He'll talk and talk and talk. You may actually have to ask him to leave at some point. Maybe. But they're usually very friendly and easygoing and well-mannered. They also know how to compliment. That's very good. Everybody likes to be complimented. Remember, what did we say before? They're very good with their speech. So they know how to communicate, and they'll choose the right words. Now, if they have some water in them, they may be even poetic. They'll write you a nice poem. Usually they're not that poetic, but they can be very, very tactful, very polite, communicate very well what you want to hear. They're knowledgeable and talkative. So if you're dating one, they'll do most of the talking. I 100% guaranteed. You know, women usually are more shy when they're dating, so as it is, they don't talk a lot. If they're dating a Gemini, they're very happy. Let him do the talking. And he will. If you let him, he'll do the talking. And they're knowledgeable. They know a lot of things. They have talent and humor, many skills and abilities. They're very good with their hands. A lot of them become surgeons, dentists, very knowledgeable and talented. And they have humor. Not every sign has humor. They like to joke. They enjoy comedy. There's a certain light-headedness to them. And therefore, they're humorous. They have a good sense of humor. They're exciting and lively. If you're looking for somebody like that, well, Geminis are lively. They can be. I mean, some of them, I remember, some of them are more quiet, but they can be lively, they can be exciting. They're not boring. They're not too serious. They're not dry. They have a cheerful disposition. You know, some people just want to, as soon as they come home, they want to see their wife cheerful, smiling. But it's not so simple with Gemini. Even though they're cheerful, what did we say before? There's a lot of contradictory characteristics in them, and we will talk about it more when we talk about the woman, the Gemini woman. But man too, he can be exciting and lively, cheerful disposition, but look at the next one. They're impatient and critical, and when they are critical, sometimes they can be stinging in their speech, but not physical. In other words, they won't hit you, unless they're a Moroccan Gemini, maybe. You know, maybe, I don't know. But usually they're not physical. But in their speech, oy vavoy, their speech, they can be very stinging. You know, and if you're a very sensitive soul, if you're a Pisces or a Taurus, and you hear some words that are not so tactful and stinging, you're going to feel very bad. And they didn't mean it, Bichlal. They're just like that. They're superficial. There's no depth to it. Remember the Aries? He gets angry. 5 minutes later, he completely forgot he got angry. I got angry? Right? So the Gemini, as much as he does what he does in a very stinging, critical way, זה לא שווה כלום, as we say in Hebrew. It doesn't really have too much depth to it. Just get over it with it. It helps to know this. But they should, of course, learn to watch their tongue, because a lot of people get hurt. They're not the jealous types or the possessive type. You know what that means? A Gemini man will talk to a lot of women because they like to talk. Now, he expects his wife to accept that. Allow me to talk to anybody I want, because I won't mind if you talk to anybody who you want, because they're not possessive. If a husband is possessive, he doesn't want to see his wife talking to just anybody, especially if he's jealous and possessive. No way. They're just the opposite. They're usually not so jealous. They don't mind, because that's the way they are with others. They'll talk to everybody. You can talk as long as I can talk. They don't mind. That does not mean that they will flirt. Okay, don't get me wrong. They will not necessarily flirt, but they will be nice to everybody. They will talk, even though it's none of their business. What are you talking to everybody? But that's just the way they are. They love to talk. So they're not the jealous or the possessive, so don't criticize them when he talks to others. They can have two of everything. 2 jobs, 2 hobbies, 2 cars, but not necessarily 2 wives, of course. But a lot of twos of everything. They're multi-talented, and they have a lot of interests and hobbies. With finances, they can be generous and sometimes miserly. They're not stingy necessarily, but sometimes they just spend, and sometimes they're not in the mood of spending. They're changeable. So you can see both in a Gemini. Now, if you're looking for perfect harmony and stability, that's not him. Some signs want something that is predictable, stable. I know what I'm getting into. This is not the man you want to marry, unless it's min hashamayim meant to be like that, right? Now, when I say there's a lack of stability, that's not necessarily bad. It just means that he may change his job, he may decide to move, he may decide to do something else. That's what I mean by lack of stability. If you're looking for stability, predictability, harmony all the time, everything's simple, that's not going to be the Gemini. Needs excitement and hates being alone. They want company. Prefers a mental partner, not too passionate. Now, this is a very important point, because they are more mental. Some signs are more passion, warmth, hugs and kisses and all that. Not with him. Don't be emotional, nagging, or harsh with him. And he's reluctant to show affection with hugs and kisses. Now, the last point is a very important point, because if you have a mother, a father, a husband, or a wife that's a Gemini, they'll be affectionate, they'll be warm. If they love you, of course they love you. Love is love. They love you, they love you. But don't expect them to be overly hugging and kissing. That's not them. It's just not them. They're not the passionate type of sign, and they don't need that for themselves either. Now, of course, everybody likes a little bit of passion sometimes, but they are more mental. As long as they can communicate with their spouse, with their child, as long as they have companionship, as long as they can talk, that's for them fulfilling, that's satisfying. That's not everything. Of course, Geminis need everything too. We all need a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this, but they need less of the passion than some of the other signs. Some of the other signs couldn't care less if you don't speak to them. As long as you sit next to them and hold their hands, that's fine. They want a little bit more demonstration of physical. Some signs are more physical. They want to feel you. Others, of course, need more expression, more demonstration. Others need more communication. People have different needs. So they're not the emotional type, and don't be nagging to them either, because they can't take it. They don't have the patience to deal with somebody who's nagging, and definitely not harsh with them. They're more mental, and that is why they prefer somebody who's more similar to them or understands them. Okay, let's go to the Gemini Woman now. Gemini Woman if you get to know one, she may have many, many personalities. You saw her in the morning, she may be completely different in the evening. They are known to have more personalities than any other sign. They're usually about 4 or 5 personalities. They can be charming, they can be nervous. They are thinkers, cynical, critical, doing all sorts of errands that are completely very different from each other. Because remember what we said before, they have the ability to do many things at the same time. Whereas some women would just get the help, a maid. No, they will do everything themselves, if they can. And therefore they will play various roles. What I mean by personalities is roles, behaviors that are completely different from each other. They can converse with you on any subject even late into the night. The Taurus tells you, let me go to sleep, I want my rest. But they will continue to talk. And they can do it even late at night. They don't mind. They enjoy talking. They can move easily from work to home to the kitchen to the reading. Remember before? Only 1 hour, they can do everything. They're going to work. Coming home, they'll cook. After that, they'll go do something else. After that, they'll go to read a book. They're no problem. Easily adaptable to every situation. They don't get tired from it, and it's not difficult. Whereas for other people, coming home from work means going to rest, going to the sofa, going to outside getting some fresh air. They will have no problem going from one to the other, to the other, to the other. That's very, very special. But it could be very exhaustive, and it could be unhelpful sometimes. Can be very picky in choosing a husband. If we're talking about a single, they can be very picky. They're very picky people. There are other signs that are picky too, but they can be very picky. And when it comes to choosing, it's not because they can't make up their mind like a Libra. Libra will hesitate, will weigh everything, the pros and cons. Is this right? Is this wrong? Is this for me? Is this not for me? They'll simply be very picky because they know they want certain qualities. And they will look for certain things. If they don't get them, they won't be interested. So they can be very picky. They make a good pal. The reason I put pal here, because you know what a pal is? A pal will go with you. You're going scuba diving, they'll go with you. You're going racing, they'll go with you. You're going cycling, they'll go with you. Not too many signs will go along with everything that you want to do. Remember what we said about Taurus? If the Taurus's wife goes somewhere he doesn't want to go, he's not going to go. He's going to stay home and sit in front of that TV, if there is a TV in the home, instead of going out. He won't go along with his wife, or she won't go along with her husband wherever he or she goes. Not necessarily, even though they love each other. But if one of the two is going somewhere where they don't want to go, they're going to be very stubborn and stay home. And you won't be able to move them an inch. They're going to be glued to that chair, no matter how much talking you do. Now, some people don't mind because they understand the Taurus. Taurus is great for some people. They understand them. They're firm. They're stubborn. They like their comfort of their home. That's good. But imagine a Gemini with a Taurus. Gemini wants excitement. Let's go together. Let's go diving. Let's go to a movie. Let's go to this. Now, we don't go to movies, Baruch Hashem, but nevertheless, just to give you an example, it could be incompatible if one wants to do something where the other one doesn't want it, and if this repeats itself every day, they're going to get divorced. Unless they learn to live with each other. Can adjust to anything you require of her. This is a big plus. You make certain requirements, certain needs that you have in the home, they can adjust very easily. No problem. As we say in Arabic, alayni wala rasi, whatever you want, okay. No problem. They'll do that. Not everyone. They're good heads. They have a very good head for business. They're mental. Remember we said they're mental? And they will go to work if needed. Not every woman will go to work. Let the husband work hard. Let him be the breadwinner. Some women will prefer to stay at home, watch the kids. I mean, they have a good excuse. We're not talking about lazy. We're talking about some women that just don't want to go out of their home. A Gemini woman has no problem going to work if necessary. If there is some needs, extra needs, new needs, she can adjust, adapt, no problem. Very, very easy going. It's a big plus for some people. They really like that. She will sympathize with your frustrations and be curious of your opinions. That's great. Some people have a lot to talk about. They may be very opinionated. They may come home frustrated from work. They will listen to you. She won't mind if her husband takes a job out of town. The Gemini woman doesn't mind that because she's versatile. She's acceptable. She accepts certain things quite easily, even though it means a certain sacrifice. What did we say before about passion, lack of passion? That closeness will not bother her as much. She won't miss it as much. As long as she can pick up the phone and speak to him, as long as she can once in a while have a dialogue with him, as long as there's enough excitement in her home, it's okay. If his job is out of town, fine. If you marry somebody who's always traveling, you better have some Gemini in you, because not every sign will want the husband to be away for so often, for so long. It's hard for some signs. A Gemini will be able to tolerate that. Can become moody, argumentative, and turn into a bag of nerves. Now this is one of the greatest weaknesses of Gemini, is that because of their nervous energy, which I talked about in the very beginning, everything can go well for a number of days and even in a number of weeks, but it accumulates. And there's a lot of nervous energy there, and all of a sudden that individual, man or woman, can become a bag. I describe it as a bag of nerves. And that's very difficult. Not every man, not every husband can deal with somebody who's a bag of nerves. Now, how do I deal with that? A lot of them just step out of the house. They can't face it. Argumentative, critical, moody, and a bag of nerves. It could be very difficult to deal with. Sometimes they will prefer to read than to make the beds or do the dishes. Now, I did not say that Gemini women don't like to make the dishes, to do the dishes or to make the beds, but they sometimes will, they will just prefer to go to read a good book and not worry about the dishes or the beds. Not a Virgo, a real Virgo, not one dish in her sink. She won't go to sleep until the sink is completely clean. A typical Virgo, that is. But a Gemini will prefer to read. They're more mental. Now look what happens with the very weak Geminis. And I purposely, intentionally say weak. Because if a woman or a man is refined, has good manners, a good upbringing, and a good education with the right values, then you won't usually encounter the following one. But the following point is sometimes seen in many homes where the woman is a Gemini. She may decide to serve her husband a can of beans for dinner, and she won't even bother to open it. Now, it's funny, but it's true. What did I just say? Very little effort went into investing in the dinner right now because her mind was somewhere else, and tired and nervous and not in the mood to do something which other women, it would be natural to them to make dinner for their husbands. Now, let's actually take this example and apply it in real life. In real life, what you may more encounter, not only with Geminis, but also with Sagittarius, with Aries, with Leos, and even with Libras a lot, is let's go out to dinner. I'm not in the mood of making dinner. Now, if the husband can afford it, fine. A Taurus wants to eat at home. What's wrong with my kitchen, my food, my home? They don't want to go eat somewhere else and be seen by people. A Taurus to be seen by others. Who wants to be seen? A Leo wants to be seen. He actually dresses up to be seen. You see the difference? So the Gemini woman may not necessarily, she's not lazy. So we're not talking about laziness. It's just, she's not in the mood to do certain things. So she may do something very, very simple. And that husband, if that husband is a Capricorn, no way in the world will he go along with that. That's a sur. A can of beans, and you didn't open it?